God, how is this happening now of all times? Edward Miller barked into the phone, his voice reverberating through the corridors of the 50th floor at Miller Industries. His eyes were fixed on the Chinese delegation as they emerged from the sleek black cars parked outside the building. The CEO stormed back and forth in his glass-walled office, his frustration mounting. The official translator had just called, delivering the crushing blow. A family emergency, they said, one that couldn't be postponed. In 15 minutes, executives from China's largest technology company would be sitting in the conference room to finalize a $200 million contract. $200 million that depended entirely on perfect communication. Mr. Miller, I've tried every translator in the city, said Olivia, his executive assistant, with the phone still glued to her ear. No one is available for a meeting of this magnitude on such short notice. Edward loosened his Italian tie, feeling sweat bead on his forehead. 20 years building Miller Industries, and it could all come crashing down because of a language barrier. The Chinese were known for their strict communication protocols. They would never tolerate a meeting conducted through translation apps or improvised gestures. Then a soft, almost whispered voice echoed from the corner of the room. Excuse me, Mr. Miller, but I speak fluent Mandarin. All eyes turned to Chloe Thompson, 28, who had paused her cleaning routine to listen to the conversation. She held a cleaning cloth in her hands and wore the standard navy blue uniform of the maintenance staff. Chloe had been working on the executive floors for 3 years, always discreet, always efficient, always invisible to most of the important people who circulated there. The silence that followed was so deep that you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Olivia was the first to react, letting out a nervous laugh. Chloe, this isn't a joke. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar international deal. Edward studied her for a moment, as if seeing her for the first time. You speak Mandarin? He asked, his voice heavy with skepticism and a hint of desperation. Mandarin, Cantonese, and a little Taiwanese, Chloe replied calmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. I studied Oriental linguistics at Howard University before I started working here. Chloe was 28 years old and had never imagined that 3 years cleaning these executive offices would prepare her for a moment like this. But all that time, while wiping down conference tables, she had listened to every conversation, absorbed every strategy, watched every move these executives made, especially Olivia. Olivia's expression quickly changed from amusement to irritation. Edward, you can't be serious. A cleaning lady conducting the most important meeting of the year. But Edward was desperate. There was something about Chloe's posture, the quiet confidence in her voice, that made him hesitate. Prove it, he said abruptly. Say something in Mandarin. Chloe took a deep breath and began to speak in perfect Mandarin, her impeccable pronunciation echoing around the room. Edward was speechless. Even though he didn't understand a word, he could sense the natural fluency, confidence, and authority in her voice. What did you say? He asked, still processing what he had just heard. That it's an honor to meet you here, and we hope our cooperation will bring mutually beneficial results, Chloe translated. It's a very respectful standard business greeting in Chinese culture. Olivia crossed her arms, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. Edward, think about it. What will the Chinese think when they see that you brought a cleaning lady to an executive meeting? At that moment, a memory flashed through Chloe's mind like lightning. 6 months ago, she had found Olivia in the executive bathroom crying on the phone, talking to someone about that black girl who hangs around the important meetings. At the time, Chloe had pretended not to hear, but she had remembered every word. For a moment that seemed like an eternity, Edward watched Chloe. There was something in her eyes, a deep intelligence, a quiet dignity that contrasted sharply with the way everyone treated her on a daily basis. For 3 years, she had cleaned these rooms, listened to these conversations, absorbed more about the workings of the company than many executives. You have 20 minutes to get yourself together, Edward finally said, ignoring Olivia's shocked stare. Put on something appropriate and meet me in the conference room. As Chloe hurried out to get ready, Olivia whispered furiously, You've completely lost your mind. When this backfires, it will be the end of your career. But Edward wasn't listening. For the first time in years, he was about to discover that the most valuable people are sometimes the ones who go unnoticed right under our noses. What none of them knew was that Chloe had been preparing for this moment longer than anyone could have imagined. And Olivia, with all her arrogance and thinly veiled prejudice, was about to discover that underestimating someone based on appearances can be the biggest mistake a person can make. If you're enjoying this story of overcoming adversity and are curious to find out how a cleaning lady can completely change the game in a room full of executives, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out what happens when talent meets its opportunity to shine. 20 minutes later, when Chloe returned to the conference room, the silence was immediate and awkward. She had changed out of her uniform and into a black outfit borrowed from the receptionist. Simple but appropriate. Her hair was pulled back into an elegant bun, and she carried a notepad like any other executive. "Jesus Christ," muttered Richard, the CFO, not trying to hide his surprise. "Is that really the same person?" Olivia didn't bother to lower her voice when she whispered to the assistant, "You can put a jewel in a piece of coal, but it's still coal inside." The Chinese delegation had arrived on time. 5 impeccably dressed executives waited in the elegant glass-walled room, chatting among themselves in Mandarin as they took in the view of Manhattan. Edward made the formal introductions, deliberately omitting Chloe's current title. "This is Chloe Thompson, our international relations specialist for the Asian market," he said, each word carefully chosen. The delegation leader, Mr. Lee, greeted Chloe with a respectful bow. When she responded in perfect Mandarin, thanking him for the honor of meeting them and praising their punctuality, a highly valued virtue in Chinese culture, his eyes lit up with genuine surprise and approval. For the first 15 minutes, Chloe translated every nuance with surgical precision. Not just the words, but the cultural tones, the diplomatic implications, even little jokes that made the Chinese laugh genuinely. The meeting flowed with a naturalness that no one had expected. That was when Olivia decided to intervene. "Chloe," she interrupted with a venomous smile, "perhaps we should explain to our guests her unique career path at the company." Edward shot her a warning glance, but Olivia continued, "It's just so inspiring to see someone reinventing themselves like that. Moving up in life, so to speak." The condescending tone was unmistakable. Chloe felt the familiar weight of humiliation, that feeling she had known since she was 18, when she had to drop out of Howard University in the middle of her junior year because her diabetic mother had lost her job and needed someone to take care of her and pay the medical bills. "Life teaches us that opportunities can come in unexpected ways," Chloe replied calmly, keeping her dignity intact as Mr. Lee watched the exchange with growing confusion. But really, who would have thought that someone who was cleaning these very rooms 3 years ago would be sitting at this table today? She paused to let the information sink in for the Chinese. It really demonstrates how our company values diversity in all its forms. The silence that followed was devastating. Chloe saw Mr. Lee's expression change subtly, not exactly contempt, but an uncomfortable surprise that made her stomach tighten. In Chinese culture, professional hierarchies were taken very seriously. Edward quickly interjected, "What Olivia meant is that we value talent wherever we find it." But the damage was done. For the next 15 minutes, Chloe felt the Chinese executives' glances shift. They were still polite, still translating when necessary, but the ease was gone. She had become a curiosity, not a professional. It was at that moment that something inside her crystallized. For 3 years, she had cleaned these rooms while executives discussed strategies, closed deals, and made decisions that moved millions. She had absorbed every word, every tactic, every mistake they made, especially Olivia's mistakes. Like the time Olivia lied about quarterly sales figures to impress a client, or when she took credit for a project that was entirely developed by a subordinate who was later fired for budgetary reasons, or when she used confidential information for her own personal negotiations. Chloe had seen everything, heard everything, and more importantly, she had kept everything. The meeting ended with a tentative, preliminary agreement. The Chinese promised to carefully consider the proposal diplomatic code for maybe, if we don't find something better. When the delegation left, Olivia couldn't hide her satisfaction. "Well, that was interesting," she said, arranging her papers with exaggerated movements. "Maybe next time we should be more transparent about our team's qualifications from the outset." Edward was visibly furious, But before he could respond, Chloe rose calmly. "Olivia," she said, her voice soft but laden with a new authority. "Mr. Chin mentioned something interesting before he left." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? Like what?" "He said he was impressed with my fluency but confused by the hierarchical dynamics of the meeting." Chloe paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "He asked if I could call him later to clarify some cultural aspects of our presentation." Olivia's expression changed subtly. "What aspects?" "Mainly why the person responsible for translation wasn't introduced as the lead negotiator, considering that in their culture, whoever speaks the language automatically assumes the position of authority." Chloe smiled softly. "He said he'd like to better understand our organizational structure before making a final decision." Olivia's face paled slightly as she processed the implications. For 3 years, Chloe had been invisible. But invisibility, she was about to discover, can be the most powerful weapon of all, especially when you've been watching, learning, and preparing for the right moment to step out of the shadows. What Olivia didn't know was that every insult, every humiliation, every attempt at sabotage was only fueling something far more dangerous than simple resentment. It was creating a strategist who knew every weakness, every secret, every lie that circulated through those corridors of power. 2 hours after the disastrous meeting, Chloe was back in her navy blue uniform, pushing her cart through the executive hallways. But this time, every move was calculated. For 3 years, she had mentally mapped every important conversation, every whispered secret, every document left carelessly on desks, especially Olivia's. "Look who's back where she belongs," Olivia commented loudly enough for all the executives in the hallway to hear as she chatted with Sarah from accounting. "After that pathetic charade today, at least we know where everyone really belongs." Chloe continued cleaning, but her hands moved automatically as her mind registered every word. Olivia had no idea that during those 3 years while cleaning her office, Chloe had seen personal emails left open, phone conversations about contract manipulation, and most importantly, those documents Olivia hid in her bottom drawer. Documents about unfair competition against smaller companies. "You know what bothers me the most?" Olivia continued, clearly showing off to Sarah. "Edward actually thought that a cleaning lady could save a $200 million deal, as if 3 years cleaning bathrooms qualified her to sit at the table with real executives." It was at that moment that Chloe's phone vibrated discreetly, a message from an unknown number, but in Chinese characters she recognized immediately. It was from Mr. Zhang. "Ms. Thompson, I would like to talk to you privately about our company and your future opportunities. Could we meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Mandarin Cafe on 42nd Street? I have a proposal that may interest you." Chloe's heart raced. This wasn't just about translation. It was about so much more. During the meeting, she had realized that Mr. Zhang was evaluating not only her linguistic fluency, but her business acumen, her poise, her dignity under pressure. That night, in her small Brooklyn apartment, Chloe opened a file on her computer that she had been building for 2 years. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Every company has its dirty secrets, and 3 years invisible in the corridors of power had given her access to information that could rock foundations. The file, titled Miller Industries Irregularities, contained 63 pages of meticulously collected evidence. Printed emails that Olivia thought she had deleted, call logs recorded by the security system when she worked on weekends, and most importantly, photos of documents proving how Olivia had deliberately sabotaged 3 contracts with companies run by Black people in the last 18 months. Chloe had seen Olivia lie to clients, take credit for projects developed by others, and most importantly, use her position to block promotions for employees she considered inappropriate for the company's image. The next day, at 10 o'clock sharp, Chloe arrived at Cafe Mandarin wearing a simple but elegant outfit she had bought with her first college savings. Mr. Zhang was already waiting, accompanied by an elegant woman who introduced herself as Maya Lin, the group's vice president of international development. "Ms. Thompson." Mr. Zhang began in English, but then switched naturally to Mandarin. "Yesterday, I observed not only your linguistic fluency, but something much more valuable, your composure under undue pressure." Maya leaned forward. "Our company is expanding operations in North America. We need someone who understands both Chinese culture and American business dynamics. Someone who has observed how business really works from the inside, and someone, Mr. Zhang added with a knowing smile, who has the dignity not to bow down to small people in big positions. For 2 hours, Chloe spoke fluently about market strategies, cultural differences in negotiations, and especially how American companies often underestimated the sophistication of Asian investors. She subtly mentioned a few irregularities she had observed at competing companies without naming names. When Maya slid a business card across the table, Chloe read, Thompson and Associates, International Consulting. Below that was an annual salary that was 5 times what she earned at Miller Industries. Consider our offer, said Mr. Zhang, standing up. But we have one specific condition. We'd like you to start by helping us investigate certain discrepancies we've discovered in Miller Industries contracts. Apparently, there is evidence of questionable practices that violate federal international trade regulations. Chloe held the card with steady hands. For 3 years, she had been treated like furniture. Now, two of Asia's most brilliant business minds were offering her not just a job, but a strategic alliance. There's an emergency meeting at Miller Industries tomorrow, Maya said quietly. We've learned that the Chinese delegation has filed a formal complaint about contract irregularities. It might be worth your while to attend. That night, Chloe called her mother. Mom, remember how you always said that patience is a smart woman's most powerful weapon? Of course, honey. Why? I think I finally understand what you meant. As she hung up the phone, Chloe looked out her apartment window at the Manhattan skyline. Tomorrow, Olivia and all of Miller Industries would discover that 3 years of invisibility had created something far more dangerous than a resentful employee. They had forged a strategist who knew every weakness, every lie, every secret of that company. And unlike the executives who underestimated people based on appearances, Chloe had learned that true strength comes from observing, planning, and acting at the exact moment when her opponents least expect it. The next morning, the executive boardroom at Miller Industries was buzzing with palpable tension. Edward had called an emergency meeting with the entire board after receiving an official report from the Chinese delegation about serious contractual irregularities that could result in a federal investigation. Olivia entered confidently, her vibrant red suit and high heels echoing authority through the hallways. She had spent the night preparing her defense, convinced she could pin all the blame on the incompetent cleaning lady Edward had brought to the meeting. Well, Olivia began, addressing the 7 board members, I imagine we're here to discuss yesterday's fiasco. As I warned, putting an unqualified employee in a negotiation of this magnitude was a reckless decision that is now costing the company $200 million. That was when the door opened silently. Chloe entered wearing an impeccable gray ensemble, not borrowed but purchased the night before with the advance the Chinese company had given her. She carried a leather briefcase and a laptop, moving with the confidence of someone who had finally found her place. I'm sorry I'm late, Chloe said calmly, taking a seat next to Edward. I was finishing up some important information for the meeting. Olivia's face twisted in ill-concealed irritation. With all due respect, Edward, I don't understand why she's here. This is an executive meeting. She's here, Edward replied coldly, because the Chinese delegation specifically requested her presence to clarify the accusations they made. Chloe opened her laptop with calculated movements. Mr. Zhang approached me yesterday afternoon with some specific concerns about Miller Industries' contracting practices. Apparently, they had discovered evidence of bid rigging and sabotage against competing companies. That's ridiculous, Olivia exploded, her tone rising an octave. What kind of evidence could a cleaning lady have about executive operations? The smile that crossed Chloe's face was soft but devastating. The kind of evidence you gather when you're invisible for 3 years and people talk in front of you as if you don't exist. Olivia's expression changed subtly, the first spark of real fear crossing her eyes. Chloe connected her laptop to the projector. The first image that appeared was an internal email from Olivia to a client, dated 6 months ago. This email, sent to Mills Corporation, contains confidential information about the Harris Company's proposals, our direct competitor at the time. The silence in the room was deafening. Olivia tried to interrupt, but Chloe continued relentlessly. This second document shows how Olivia deliberately inflated the costs of projects led by Black and Latino employees, forcing cancellations that she then attributed to the incompetence of those responsible. The screen showed spreadsheets with obvious alterations, internal emails, and security system recordings. For 3 years, Chloe had meticulously documented every irregularity. "This is a setup," Olivia shouted, jumping to her feet. "She's fabricating evidence to get revenge because I exposed her true position in the company." Chloe remained calmly seated. "Mr. Edward, the recording I'm about to play was made by the company's own security system 8 months ago." Olivia's voice echoed through the room speakers. "We can't allow these types of people to think they belong in executive meeting rooms. It's a matter of maintaining appropriate standards in the company." Olivia's face turned pale instantly. She remembered that conversation, a private discussion with Richard about keeping the company free of unsuitable elements. "And this," Chloe continued, displaying a new recording, "is from 2 weeks ago, when Olivia deliberately instructed the receptionist to lose resumes from candidates with names that sounded too ethnic." One of the directors, Mr. Harris, a 60-year-old black man who had been with the company for 15 years, leaned forward with a grim expression. "Olivia, is this true?" "Aye, that's out of context," Olivia stammered, sweat beginning to form small beads on her forehead. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under to maintain company standards." "Company standards," Chloe said softly, "include ethics, integrity, and compliance with federal anti-discrimination laws, all of which have been systematically violated over the last 18 months. Edward turned to Olivia, his expression stony. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you shouldn't be fired for cause," and reported to the district attorney. Olivia looked desperately around the table, searching for an ally, a sympathetic face. She found only looks of disapproval and disgust. "You're making a terrible mistake," she whispered, her voice breaking. "She's just a resentful cleaning lady who—" "She," Edward interrupted authoritatively, "is our new director of international relations, and you're fired." The silence that followed was absolute. Olivia remained standing, swaying slightly, processing that her 15-year career had ended in a matter of minutes. "Your access credentials will be revoked immediately," Edward continued. "Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings." "And Olivia," he paused, considering the seriousness of the evidence presented, "we will be forwarding everything to the federal attorney's office." As security escorted Olivia out, she shot Chloe one last venomous look. "You may have one today, but that doesn't change what you really are." Chloe met her gaze with unflinching calm. "You're right. I am exactly what I've always been. Someone who watches, learns, and acts at the right moment. The difference is that now, finally, I'm where I've always belonged." 3 hours later, when the meeting ended with Chloe officially named to her new position, Edward called her aside. "How did you pull this off?" 3 years of evidence, recordings, documents. Chloe smiled for the first time in days. When you're treated like furniture, people forget that furniture has eyes and ears. Olivia underestimated the power of invisibility and overestimated the value of her own arrogance. At that moment, as she looked out at her new office overlooking Manhattan, Chloe realized that the best revenge wasn't destroying Olivia, but building something greater than she could ever imagine. The future that awaited her would be written by her own hand, and this time, no one could erase her signature. 6 months later, Chloe Thompson sat in her new office on the 38th floor of Miller Industries, reviewing the contracts she had signed with Asian companies. Her glass desk was covered with documents in Mandarin, Cantonese, and English, negotiations that had already yielded $400 million in new contracts for the company. "Chloe, the South Korean delegation has arrived," announced Sarah, who now worked as her personal assistant. "They are eager to meet the woman who tripled our business in Asia in just 6 months." Through the window, Chloe could see the city she had once observed only as an invisible cleaning lady. Now, as Director of International Relations, she had become one of Manhattan's most respected executives. Her annual salary of $300,000 had allowed her mother to receive the best treatment for diabetes, and she had been able to complete her master's degree through an executive program at Columbia University. "What about the Forbes meeting next week?" Sarah asked, consulting her busy schedule. "Confirmed," Chloe replied, adjusting the navy blue blazer she wore, not out of obligation, but by choice. They want to talk about my inclusion on the list of the country's most influential young female executives. Across town, Olivia sat in the small apartment she had rented in Queens after being evicted from her Manhattan condo. Medical bills for psychological therapy piled up on the coffee table, along with dozens of rejection letters from companies where she had applied for jobs. The federal investigation into her discriminatory practices had resulted in a $50,000 personal fine and a 5-year ban from holding executive positions at companies with federal contracts. Her name had appeared in every major business newspaper as an example of toxic leadership, making her virtually unemployable. That morning, she had seen Chloe's photo on the cover of Businessweek magazine, smiling confidently alongside Chinese executives, with the headline, "The Translator Who Revolutionized International Business." The irony hit her like a slap in the face. Back at Miller Industries, Edward had called a meeting with the entire board to announce the exceptional results for the semester. Chloe Thompson not only saved our deal with the Chinese, he declared to the roomful, she opened doors to markets we never thought possible to penetrate. Mr. Harris, the same black director who had witnessed Olivia's downfall, stood up to give a short speech. In my 40 years in corporate America, I have rarely seen a transformation as dramatic as the one Chloe has brought to our company. She has proven that true talent has no color, no social class, and definitely does not hide behind prejudice. The audience applauded enthusiastically as Chloe remained modestly seated, remembering the woman who used to clean that same boardroom just 7 months earlier. That night, in her renovated apartment on the Upper East Side, Chloe received a call from her mother. "Honey, I saw your interview on television today. You spoke so well about second chances and perseverance." "I learned from the best," Chloe replied, smiling. "You always told me that people can try to diminish us, but they can never diminish what we know and what we are capable of doing." During the television interview, Chloe had been asked about Olivia and whether she felt any resentment toward her for the way she had been treated. Her response had been precise and elegant. "Olivia gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. She showed me exactly who I didn't want to become. Her arrogance and prejudice taught me that true power comes from lifting others up, not stepping on them." 3 weeks later, Chloe was at Howard University, her alma mater, announcing the scholarship program she had created for low-income students who had to interrupt their studies due to financial difficulties. "No one should have to choose between taking care of their family and pursuing their dreams," she told an audience of 500 emotional students. The Second Chance program, funded in part by her own salary, had already approved 20 full scholarships for the coming semester. Olivia, watching the ceremony online in her small apartment, turned off her computer with tears in her eyes. For the first time in months, they weren't tears of self-pity, but of something that was beginning to feel like genuine regret. Meanwhile, Chloe returned to the office where 3 years earlier she had pushed a cleaning cart through the same hallways. Now young executives greeted her respectfully, secretaries asked her for career advice, and most importantly, she had become a mentor to 5 other employees in operational departments who showed untapped potential. "You know what's most fascinating about this whole story?" Edward asked Chloe during a private conversation. "You could have used all that information about Olivia to destroy her personally, but you chose only to expose her professional misconduct." Chloe smiled softly. "The best revenge is never to destroy someone. It's to build something so extraordinary that it renders everything they tried to do against you irrelevant." Chloe Thompson's story proved that genuine talent, unwavering dignity, and quiet preparation can overcome any prejudice or injustice. She turned 3 years of invisibility into the greatest advantage of her career, showing that sometimes the most powerful people are the ones you don't even notice watching, learning, and preparing to shine. Olivia tried to humiliate her based on prejudice and arrogance, but ended up being the architect of her own destruction. Chloe taught the corporate world that true leadership does not come from titles or privileges, but from the ability to see potential where others see only limitations. If this story of overcoming adversity and justice touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that, in the end, talent and dignity always find their way to the top, no matter how many obstacles are put in their path.